In the middle of Cypress Cove, Florida, where the sun bakes the sidewalks and every lawn is cut within an inch of its life, Mark Tully thought he'd found peace. He had no kids, no dog, no loud stereo, just a quiet life and a passion for wildlife, especially reptiles. His home. Neat, tidy. One of the only on the block with native plants instead of chemically manicured turf. It stood out, but not offensively. The real offense came from what lived inside it. Mark had a license from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission to house several non-venomous reptiles, mostly rescues. They were harmless. In fact, some were old enough to qualify for Social Security, if they were people, but to one person on his street, they were enough to declare war. Her name was Karen Whitmore. She wasn't just on the HOA board. She was the HOA board, at least in her mind. Tall, wiry, always walking around with a legal pad and Bluetooth headset. Karen believed the entire neighborhood was her reality show, and Mark was the villain who needed to be written off the script. The two had barely exchanged words before. The first letter showed up in Mark's mailbox, a printed notice demanding he remove unauthorized animals from residential premises. She signed it in red ink. No HOA stamp. No legal basis, just arrogance. Mark laughed and tossed it in the shredder. That should have been the end. But Karen escalated. She began showing up outside his home during feeding time. She took photos over the hedges. One night, he spotted her holding up her phone, through his side window recording through the glass. He warned her once, formally, then twice. He even installed motion cameras. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was a humid Thursday afternoon, when Mark returned from a supply run. His front door wasn't quite shut. Not wide open, just cracked. His instincts kicked in. He reached for his phone and checked the front cam feed. Static. The signal had been interrupted. He quickly loaded the backup wildlife cam inside. The one aimed at his hallway for his educational videos. The feed came through clear. What he saw made his stomach flip. Karen Whitmore. In his house. She was wearing latex gloves and tiptoeing through his living room, muttering under her breath. One hand held a stun device. The other carried a small duffel bag. She was looking for something. Or maybe planning to take something. But what she didn't realize was that one of Mark's favorite rescues, Lucifer, wasn't in his enclosure anymore. Lucifer wasn't venomous, but he was intimidating. A black-headed python over 8 feet long. Curious, fast, and very aware of strangers. On the video, Karen opened the wrong door. The one to the reptile room. She stepped inside. The lights were dim. The camera didn't follow her in. Seconds passed. Then, the screen flashed. A blur moved across the floor. Then, a scream piercing, echoing through the hallway cam. Something crashed. Something thudded. And just like that, the footage cut to black. Mark stared at the screen, frozen. He didn't know whether to call the police, animal control, or a lawyer. All he knew was someone had broken into his home and got far more than they bargained for. But what came next wasn't just a wild incident, it was a scandal. And Karen had just slithered into the worst mistake of her life. Because the bite wasn't the biggest threat that day, what Mark discovered next would shock the entire HOA board and trigger a chain of events that would turn the neighborhood into a war zone of lawsuits, media coverage, and one very unexpected eviction. So stick around, because this is only the beginning. The scream still echoed in Mark's ears as he stood frozen in his entryway. His front door was ajar, his main camera feed dead, and the only evidence he had of what had just happened was on his backup wildlife camera. Now static screen, showing nothing but fuzz. Karen Whitmore, the neighborhood's queen of control, had trespassed into his home, uninvited, with gloves, a taser, and what looked like a snake-catching sack. And now, she'd vanished. Mark took a slow step inside, eyes darting to each corner like he was entering a jungle instead of his living room. The silence was heavy. No movement. No sound. And no Karen. Lucifer, he called out quietly. There was a gentle rustling behind the couch. Mark stepped forward and peered over the edge. There she was. Not Karen. Lucifer. The black-headed python was coiled, calm, as ever, resting beside the bottom of the curtain like it was just another Tuesday. His tongue flicked the air lazily. Completely unbodied, Mark knelt beside him and gave him a gentle tap on the tail. Good boy, he whispered, but Karen. She was gone. He checked every room, every closet, even the pantry. No trace. The only evidence she had even been inside were faint sneaker prints on his laminate floor and an open enclosure door in the reptile room. And then, Just as he reached to shut off the light, he saw it, a phone, face down on the hallway floor. Slim, sparkly case. Cracked corner. Karen single quotes as Mark picked it up carefully, using the sleeve of his hoodie. The screen flickered on, passcode locked, but one notification sat waiting at the top. Recording saved to cloud. Oh, she'd been recording. Probably planned to post it to the HOA Facebook page with some smug caption like "Caught this illegal wildlife operation in action." But now, she had nothing except maybe a fresh stain on her reputation. And hopefully, her pants. 10 minutes later, Mark heard sirens. He didn't even call them, but someone had. 2 sheriff's deputies showed up at his doorstep, responding to a possible home intrusion with a medical emergency. Mark stepped out onto the porch, arms raised slightly, calm but firm. "Officers, everything is fine now. But you're going to want to see this footage." Deputy Wallace, a stocky man with sun-worn cheeks and wraparound shades, looked skeptical. "Sir, we received a 911 call from a female stating she'd been attacked by a large animal inside this home." Mark blinked. "And did she mention that she broke in first?" The second deputy, a younger woman with a body cam blinking red, chimed in. "Do you have surveillance footage?" "I do," Mark said, gesturing them inside. "And a permit for every animal in here." Inside, he pulled up the backup cam feed on his laptop. The deputies watched in silence Kieran entering the home, the duffel bag, the taser, the slow creep toward the reptile room, and then, the scream. Both officers raised their eyebrows. "She broke in?" The younger one asked. "Yep," Mark said. "Disabled my front security cam, too. Took her own video and dropped her phone. You'll find it over their gloves and all." Deputy Wallace nodded slowly. "All right, sir. We'll need to collect her device and file a report." "Sounds like you were the one violated here." Mark smiled faintly. She had no clue what she walked into. As the officers wrapped up, Wallace turned back. "By the way, we found her. About 3 houses down. Curled up in a neighbor's azalea bushes. Said she was assaulted by a serpent. She didn't mention anything about trespassing." Mark raised an eyebrow. "You don't say." Later, that evening, Mark posted a simple, polite message on the neighborhood's official HOA message board. "To all residents, please respect the privacy of your neighbors. Also, just in case anyone is wondering, yes, Lucifer is safe and well. Charges will be filed." Yet, the comments poured in. Some curious, some amused, and a few suspiciously quiet, especially from Karen's usual cronies. But Mark wasn't finished. Because when he reviewed the rest of Karen's cloud footage later that night, he saw something she didn't know had been recorded, something far worse than trespassing. There was a document. A sealed envelope in her duffel bag, with the HOA logo on it, and a list of addresses. And next to Mark's, the word, "remove." The next morning, Mark sat at his dining room table with a steaming mug of coffee in one hand and Karen's cloud footage open on his laptop. His jaw tightened with every frame he watched. It was surreal. The video Karen recorded was clearly meant to paint him as a neighborhood menace. She'd entered through the side gate using what looked like a copied HOA master key and whispered updates into the camera like she was starring in her own reality show. This is where the subject allegedly stores the illegal snakes. "Oh, look at this. He's got cages. Probably breeding them. Disgusting." But then came the part Mark hadn't noticed before. Around the 2-minute mark, Karen squatted beside her duffel bag and pulled out an envelope. She opened it carefully, showing the camera its contents. Like she was presenting evidence in a courtroom. Inside were printed documents, HOA letterhead, names, addresses. She skimmed her fingers down a list and there it was, Mark Tully, remove. Underneath, Erica and Daniel Cho, Code 5 violation pending mices. Price Lot 12 unsafe landscaping Gomez family, pet violation. Second notice dog barking. Remove. Mark sat back, heart thumping. These weren't violations. These were targets. This wasn't an enforcement list. It was a hit list. He zoomed in. At the bottom corner, barely visible in the frame, was a note scribbled in red pen. Meet at Karen's, 6 p.m. Thursday. Finalize. Mark's blood ran cold. He didn't just have proof Karen broke into his home. He had footage suggesting the HOA, at least some of its board, was trying to push people out deliberately. And not for real violations. They were targeting anyone who didn't conform to their picture of the perfect neighborhood. It was organized bullying, dressed up in homeowner policy. Mark pulled out his phone and called the one person he trusted in Cyprus Kovirika Shu. Erika was a sharp, no-nonsense accountant with a biting wit and a better understanding of the HOA bylaws than anyone else in the neighborhood. If Karen was the self-appointed queen, Erika was the quiet revolution brewing behind closed blinds. When Mark showed her the video, she didn't say a word at first, just watched then. Finally, she looked up and said, "She's been trying to nail us for months. Said our compost bin was a rodent invitation. She even threatened to fine us for using solar string lights. Who does that?" "She had your name under mine," Mark replied. "They're planning something. Thursday, at her house." Erika narrowed her eyes. "Then we need to be ready before Thursday. No more ignoring this." That afternoon, Mark and Erika met in secret just like they were planning a heist. Over coffee and HOA paperwork spread out like maps, they formed a strategy. They'd gather more evidence, talk to other homeowners on the list, and if possible, expose the entire operation. They started with Mrs. Price. At 78 years old, she had lived in Cypress Cove longer than anyone. Her yard was a whimsical mess of rose bushes, wind chimes, and birdhouses. Karen hated it. "Of course, she's been telling me to cut everything down," Mrs. Price said when they arrived. "Called it a visual hazard, but I've won best garden 3 years straight." Erika showed her the photo from the footage. Mrs. Price gasped. "They want to remove me. I've been here since '96. By the end of the day, they'd spoken to 4 families, all of whom were either under review, had received surprise citations, or, in one case, were already being fined weekly for made-up violations. Something sinister was unraveling, and now, they weren't going to sit quietly and let it happen. That night, Mark installed 2 more hidden cameras outside his home. Not because he feared snakes, but because people were proving to be far more dangerous. He re-watched the footage of Karen crawling through his hallway. The part that stuck with him wasn't the scream, or the panic, or even the hilarity of her hiding in bushes 3 doors down like a defeated villain. It was the way she spoke to the camera like she believed, beyond all reason, that she was the hero. That made her more dangerous than any predator. But this story wouldn't end with a scream, it would end with evidence, exposure, and possibly a complete HOA takeover. 2 days before Karen's mysterious Thursday meeting, Mark and Erika were moving fast. The plan was simple in theory: expose the HOA's backdoor tactics before they could carry out their scheme. But this wasn't a courtroom. It was suburbia, where the rules weren't enforced by law, but by gossip, intimidation, and paperwork. Buried in subclauses. And right now, the HOA controlled all 3. Erika had already drafted a formal complaint with supporting video, stills and testimonies from other homeowners. Mark was editing together a short, clean-cut version of the trespass footage, one that focused on Karen's words, the list, and the duffel bag, not the scream or Lucifer's dramatic slither by. The idea was to keep the evidence compelling, not theatrical. They didn't want a laugh track, they wanted a reckoning. But what they didn't know was that someone on the inside was watching them. Wednesday morning started quietly. Too quietly, Mark stepped onto his porch to find a large manila envelope taped to his mailbox. No return address, just one word: stop. Inside was a printed photo and image of Mark sitting at his kitchen table, reviewing the cloud footage, taken through the window. Attached was a single sticky note: "Not everyone on the board is your enemy, but some of us bite harder than your pets." Mark's gut clenched. Someone else had been inside his property. Again. And whoever it was, they had surveillance skills. It wasn't Karen this time. Karen was a sledgehammer. This was a scalpel. He called Erika. She was already on edge. "Guess who showed up at my house this morning?" she said. "Darren, HOA secretary. Tried to drop off paperwork, but started asking questions. About you. About Mrs. Price." I didn't tell him anything. But Mark, he was nervous. Really, nervous. Darren, middle-aged, glasses, the guy who always brought cupcakes to board meetings like he was everyone's favorite uncle. Turns out Uncle Darren might have been sitting on more than meeting notes. "We need someone at that Thursday meeting," Erika said. A set of eyes inside. Mark hesitated. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "Oh, I'm thinking it," she replied. "We're sending in Mrs. Price." To their surprise, the elderly garden warrior was more than willing. "About time I stirred up some trouble." She smirked, straightening her floral visor. "And don't worry, I've been wearing microphones since Watergate." With a tiny lapel mic hidden in the button of her cardigan, Mrs. Price was ready. Her job: attend Karen's private HOA finalization. meeting under the guise of delivering cupcakes and nosy old lady charm. She'd been invited mostly as a formality, but that formality was now a tactical edge. Meanwhile, Mark had one goal: secure his home tighter than a vault. Motion lights, wireless alarms, a backup generator for the camera system. Even Lucifer's enclosure was reinforced, which is why what happened that night made no sense. At 3:17 a.m., Mark's phone lit up with a motion alert. He rolled over, groggy, and tapped the notification. Camera 3 backdoor hallway was offline. He sat up fast. Within seconds, he loaded the remaining feeds. Living room clear, garage clear, reptile room dash static. His stomach dropped. He grabbed the flashlight, grabbed the collapsible baton he kept for fuel, and made his way through the dark house. The back door was open. Wide, no sign of forced entry, just open. He crept toward the reptile room, every floorboard creak sounding like thunder in the silence. Inside, the light was on. One enclosure was open. Lucifer, single quotes S, but this time, it wasn't Karen who had left it that way. Near the wall, behind the desk, was a footprint, wet, slightly muddy. Mark backed out slowly and checked the outdoor cam. There, clear as day, was a figure climbing over his fence. Male hoodie, slim build. Not Karen. Not anyone from the neighborhood he recognized. Whoever this was, they weren't scared off by snakes. They were looking for something, and if Lucifer had slithered by them, they hadn't flinched. That terrified Mark more than anything else. The next day, Mark and Erica combed through the footage again. It was the same hoodie-wearing figure from earlier clips, possibly the one who left the stop. Envelope. Someone's running recon on us, Erica said. And it's not just Karen playing house detective anymore. This is planned. They were facing more than a petty HOA grudge. This was a coordinated effort. Someone was spying, covering their tracks, and now trespassing in complete silence. Which made Thursday's meeting more important than ever. It was time to corner the snake, but, as Mrs. Price was about to learn, not all of them live in cages. Thursday evening arrived like the calm before a thunderstorm. The lawns in Cypress Cove were mowed. Flags fluttered, sprinklers hissed. But inside, Karen Whitmore's oversized Mediterranean-style house on Lot 33, something venomous was slithering. Just beneath the surface, the so-called HOA finalization meeting had been set for 6 p.m. sharp. Officially, it was off the books, a private discussion among senior board members. But unofficially, it was the moment Mark and Erica had been working toward. Inside Karen's house, an assortment of HOA brass had already gathered. Darren, the overly sweet secretary with a sinister side. Pamela, the treasurer with the pastel-colored wardrobe and fake smile. And then, of course, Karen dressed in a navy blue power suit like she was testifying before Congress, and tucked into the corner. Balancing a tray of chocolate chip muffins with a purse the size of a desktop printer, was Mrs. Price. "Just thought I'd bring something sweet for all your serious faces," she said with a grin, her floral cardigan hiding the tiny mic pinned to her collar. "You kids look like you're plotting a revolution." Karen forced a laugh. "Just business, June. Nothing scandalous." But oh, how wrong she was. Back at Mark's place, he and Erica were glued to a laptop, watching a clean audio feed streamed in from the mic Mrs. Price had activated moments before stepping inside. They could hear every voice, every footstep, every passive-aggressive fake compliment. At first, the conversation circled around minor code issues, trash bins left out, an unauthorized garden gnome. But 20 minutes in, the temperature changed. Karen's voice turned cold. "We have 4 non-compliance targets on the list," she said. "We've already filed 2 repeat citations. The CHOs are close to their 3rd. That gives us cause for forced lien placement." Pamela chimed in. "Are we sure we want to push that hard?" Karen answered without hesitation. "This community is slipping. If we don't clean it up now, the property values will suffer. You want unsupervised children and reptiles dragging our reputation down." Erica leaned toward the speaker. "There it is," she muttered. Then came the real reveal. Darren's voice cut in, low and hesitant. "What about the Tully situation?" Karen scoffed. "He's practically begging to be fined. I told the inspector to take special notice of his landscaping and animal permits. If we can't catch him on housing code, we'll find a safety violation. The moment he slips, we file a petition to ban exotic animals in HOA zones." Mark's jaw tensed. "She's going after my license." Karen continued. "We've got the votes. And once it's in effect, we cite him for every remaining animal. He'll have to surrender them or relocate. That's illegal, Erica muttered. You can't retroactively criminalize someone's setup just because you don't like them. But Karen wasn't finished. She opened a folder, and as for Mrs. Price, she said casually, we declare her yard a fire hazard. Call the county. Let them bulldoze it for us. The room chuckled, but the next line made everything go still. Worst case, Karen said, if any of them push back, we make sure they're uncomfortable. A few anonymous calls, a broken camera, a misplaced snake. Whatever works. Erica slammed her hand on the desk. She was going to plant something. Mark's face went pale. That break-in wasn't about stealing. They were going to sabotage me. Back at Karen's house, Mrs. Price pretended to cough just to mask the sound of her heartbeat, but before she could quietly excuse herself, something strange happened. A door creaked open at the far end of the hallway. Karen turned. I said no guests, she snapped. From the shadows emerged a figure, slender, HOODIE-clad, the same man who'd broken into Mark's house. He approached silently and handed Karen a USB drive. Everything you asked for. Full footage. Karen took it with a smug smirk. Perfect. If he tries anything, this goes straight to legal. Who's that? Pamela asked. Confused. Karen waved her off. A favor from my nephew. He handles IT for county law enforcement. Knows how to make things disappear. Erica's eyes widened. She has a plant in the county. Mark grabbed his phone. We need to go public. Now, by the time Mrs. Price finally slipped out and returned home, they had everything. Audio of the threats, confirmation of planted evidence, and video of the mystery man handing off the drive. But the problem wasn't just exposing Karen, it was stopping what she planned to do next, because if she had that USB, she might already be preparing to edit, tamper, or even frame Mark for illegal activity with his reptiles. The storm was here, and Karen had more venom than they realized. But so did Mark, and he was done playing nice. By Friday morning, the storm wasn't just coming, it had landed. Karen had moved first. At exactly 9 a.m., Cypress Cove's private HOA Facebook group, usually a sleepy scroll of lawn tips and lost cat alerts, exploded. A video had been posted by Karen herself. The caption read, Urgent Community Safety Warning. Exotic Animal Threat Exposed. The video, a heavily edited montage of Mark's home. Blurry footage of snake enclosures, exaggerated zoom-ins of Lucifer's yawning mouth, and slowed-down clips from Karen's trespass footage conveniently trimmed to make her look like a concerned citizen rather than a criminal. Worst of all, a voiceover by Karen. In a calm motherly tone, she narrated, as HOA president, I had no choice but to investigate after numerous complaints. What I found was shocking: unsecure cages, illegal housing, and a blatant disregard for community safety. These snakes could pose a lethal threat to children, pets, and the elderly. The comments poured in. Some skeptical, many not. A few were outright panicked. Wait, he has WHAT inside his house. My kid walks by there every day. Is this legal? Why hasn't he been shut down? Mark sat at his desk in silence, watching his name and his license get dragged into the digital mud. Erica burst in, holding her tablet. We've got to respond fast. She's gone full smear campaign. Mark leaned back, jaw clenched. She's trying to get me fired. This could cost me everything. But before he could open his laptop, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. Hello. A deep voice replied, Mr. Tully. My name is Detective Reeves with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission. We've received an anonymous complaint regarding improper containment of regulated reptiles. I'd like to stop by today. Mark's heart dropped. It was happening. Karen hadn't just tried to ruin his reputation. She'd escalated it to the state. By noon, Reeves arrived, clean-cut late 40s. Quiet intensity in his eyes. Not the kind of guy you could charm or explain things away to. Mark greeted him at the gate with his license, registration papers, and a thick binder of compliance records. Reeves nodded but said little as he stepped inside and surveyed the enclosures. Lucifer blinked lazily from his temperature-regulated box, unbothered by the drama. The other reptiles, turtles, small snakes, even a harmless iguana sat peacefully in clean, locked setups. Reeves walked the room twice, then turned to Mark. Everything looks in order. Mark exhaled, but Reeves added, we did receive footage claiming you left cages unsecured and allowed the animals to roam freely. Do you have any explanation for that? Mark clicked a button on his laptop and queued up the unedited video. Karen breaking in. Karen whispering about removing people. Karen opening the wrong door. And most importantly, Lucifer slithering freely only after she opened the enclosure. Reeves watched the entire clip silently. When it ended, he looked at Mark and nodded. This changes things. Mark smiled faintly. Does that mean I'm clear? Reeves tucked away his notepad. From a wildlife regulation standpoint, yes, but I suggest you take this higher. What she's doing isn't just unethical, it may be criminal. Within an hour, Erica helped Mark publish a counter video, title, The Truth Behind Karen Snake's Story, What She Didn't Want You to See. No music, no drama, just the facts, the full trespass footage, the HOA meeting, audio, and Karen's admission of manipulating rules to push people out. And then, the twist. Erica added one more clip. Karen's nephew, the mystery hoodie guy, being caught on camera handing off the USB during the secret meeting. By the way, Erica said in the video, this is the same individual seen breaking into my friend's home 3 nights ago. Police report has been filed. The video went viral fast. Within hours, residents flooded the HOA page with angry comments. This is outrageous. She framed him, remove Karen and immediately. Someone even updated Karen's title in the community wiki too. Karen Whitmore, former HOA tyrant, suspended pending investigation by that evening. Mark's inbox was full of support. Several neighbors offered to help him press charges. Even the Gomez family, previously silent, reached out with their own recordings of Karen's intimidation tactics. But amid the storm of community outrage, one message stood out. A short email. They're not done. Be careful. Mark blinked. Darren, the cupcake-carrying too-friendly HOA secretary. Was he switching sides? Or just covering his own tracks? Either way, Mark knew it wasn't over. Because that USB, IT held more than one meeting's worth of secrets. And the next file he opened would shake Cypress Cove down to its foundations. It was nearly midnight when Mark sat back at his desk and inserted the USB drive Karen had received from her so-called nephew, the same man who'd been caught trespassing in his home, who'd handed her the device during the HOA meeting, and who, according to Detective Reeves, wasn't listed on any county employment records at all. The drive blinked once, then loaded. Erica, on speakerphone, listened in from home. Please tell me it's not snake memes, she said, trying to ease the tension. Mark didn't laugh. What he saw wasn't what he expected. The drive held a series of folders, some labeled enforcement targets, lien paths, and one ominously titled transfer records. 2022 to 2024. He clicked the last one. Inside were dozens of PDFs, bank transfers, HOA expense reimbursements, vendor invoices. But they didn't add up. A landscaping company called Sungrove Greenscapes had billed the HOA over $40,000 in 6 months for routine trimming and bush shaping. Mark narrowed his eyes. I've never even seen these guys in the neighborhood, he muttered. He cross-referenced the business address on Google. The company didn't exist. The address led to a shuttered diner in Ocala. He clicked into another file, a check cut to Palmlight Security Services, supposedly for neighborhood patrols. But Cypress Cove didn't have a patrol service. Erica, Mark said slowly, I think this is bigger than Karen. She was silent for a second. You think they're laundering money? I think someone created fake vendors and is funneling HOA funds through shell companies. And they're using Karen to stir up chaos as a distraction. The trespassing, the snake fear, the videos, the sudden citations against homeowners who questioned the board. It wasn't about control. It was about covering up theft by morning. Mark and Erica had compiled enough documentation to build a case. Erica, with her accounting background, created a spreadsheet tracking every suspicious transaction. The numbers were damning. More than $180,000 in fraudulent payments over 2 years. They needed help. Real help. They reached out to Detective Reeves. After a single phone call and a brief file share, he agreed to meet them in person. You're not just talking about HOA abuse now, Reeves said that afternoon, flipping through the documents. This is felony-level fraud. Mail fraud, wire fraud, possibly even conspiracy. He paused, and if this turns out to be connected to someone, on the county records side someone who helped cover these payments, this could go federal. Mark leaned forward. We think Karen's just the mouthpiece. Someone else is moving the money. Maybe Darren. He sent me a warning email. Reeves tilted his head. Interesting. Because I just checked Aaron Jenkins filed a corporate registration for Sungrove Greenscapes 18 months ago. Under a different address. Erica blinked. So he owns the fake company. Reeves nodded. Looks like it. That night, Mark received another message. This time, hand-delivered in a plain envelope tucked beneath his doormat. No return address. But inside was a photo, a picture of Mark. Taken from across the street. Through a window, the note attached read, "Back off, we're watching." Erica was furious. "We need to go public again. This time, all of it." But Mark hesitated. Not yet. He had an idea, and it involved trapping the real snake. Saturday morning, Mark invited a few of the more vocal, suspicious residents to a casual coffee meet at his place. Mrs. Price brought cookies. The Chos came armed with complaint letters they'd saved. The Gomez family showed up with video clips of Karen yelling at their dog through a fence. Mark waited until they all gathered, then he projected the contents of the USB onto his TV. Faces turned white. "This," Mark said, "is what they've been doing behind your backs? It's not about snakes. It's not about garden gnomes or flamingos. It's about money. Your money." Murmurs turned into outrage. "We've been paying for fake companies." One neighbor shouted, "That's why my dues went up this year," said another. Mark raised a hand. "Tomorrow, I'm turning this into the county fraud division, but tonight, I need you all to come with me." Erica stepped forward. "Karen and the board are holding a special emergency vote at 6 p.m. in the clubhouse. They're trying to push through a new clause banning exotic animals and expanding board authority over personal property." Mark looked around. "We're going to crash it." 6:01 p.m., Cypress Cove Clubhouse. Karen stood at the podium, dressed in read this time power color. The room was half full, mostly loyalists and a few board retirees. Darren sat to her left, sweating slightly. "We'll begin with agenda item 1, Karen said, smiling tightly. Revised Enforcement Authority. Under section, excuse me, a voice rang out. The doors swung open. Mark walked in, followed by Erica, Mrs. Price, the Chos, the Gomezes, and nearly 24 other residents, armed with documents, recordings, and screenshots. Karen's smile faded. Mark stepped forward. "Before you vote on anything, I think everyone here deserves to know how you've been spending their money." He handed a folder to a woman in the second row. She opened it, gasped, and passed it down. The room exploded. Darren stood up, his voice trembling. "This is slander." "No," Mark said, pulling out a printed screenshot. "This is your signature on a vendor contract for a company that doesn't exist." Karen turned pale. And then, someone stood up in the back, a man with a badge clipped to his belt. Detective Reeves. "I think that's enough for tonight," he said calmly. "Karen Whitmore. Darren Jenkins. You'll need to come with me. You're both under investigation for criminal fraud, misuse of funds, and conspiracy to defraud homeowners." Karen stammered. "You can't do this. I was trying to protect the community." "No," Reeves said. "You were hiding behind rules while you lined your pockets." The clubhouse echoed with gasps, shouting, and the unmistakable snap of handcuffs. Karen Whitmore stood frozen in the center of the room, her confident red blouse suddenly looking like a warning flag. Darren Jenkins had already slumped into a chair, face in his hands, defeated. Detective Reeves read them their rights with the calm cadence of a man who had done this many times before. But even as Mark watched the drama unfold, he couldn't shake the tight knot in his stomach. It felt finished, but not complete. 2 days later, Cypress Cove was quieter than it had been in years. Karen and Darren had been removed from the HOA board. Interim leadership was being discussed. The neighborhood was still buzzing about Snakegate, as the local newspaper dubbed it. Erica, now everyone's favorite accountant warrior, was being begged to run for HOA president. Mark, meanwhile, had gone back to quietly tending his reptiles, and enjoying something he hadn't had in weeks, peace, until Sunday night. He found another envelope taped to his front gate, but this one wasn't a threat. It was a letter typed, anonymous. "You got the puppets, not the puppeteer, the fake vendors." Darren's idea, sure, but who approved them without ever reviewing documentation? Who changed the bylaw in 2021 to allow the HOA president unilateral vendor selection powers? You're looking for someone who never shows up to the meetings, someone who always votes, always signs, but never speaks. Look at the treasurer's assistant. D. ***. Mark stared at the note, a chill running down his spine. He pulled out the meeting attendance logs Erica had sent him earlier. Pamela, the HOA treasurer, had a clean public face, pastel cardigans, potluck champion, always the first to donate a dessert tray. But her assistant, Gloria, a quiet, bird-like woman who never made a scene, had her signature on every vendor check Darren submitted, without question, without rejection. In fact, Gloria had technically processed all the largest checks, including to that Darren never had access to himself. That night, Mark and Erica met up with Detective Reeves again. When they showed him the new evidence, he didn't look surprised, just disappointed. "I had a feeling," Reeves said. "She's smart. The type that uses louder people as shields. We'll bring her in for questioning." Mark frowned. "Do you think she knew everything Darren was doing?" Reeves zipped up his folder. "I think she was the one doing most of it." Within a week, the investigation widened. Gloria was placed under administrative review by the HOA Oversight Committee. A forensic audit confirmed she'd processed over $90,000 in unauthorized funds, all directed toward either fake businesses or consulting entities that didn't exist. When investigators visited her modest home just outside Cypress Cove, they found bags of shredded documents and a brand new sports car parked in the garage, purchased entirely in cash. Gloria didn't speak a word during her arrest, but her silence said everything back at Cypress Cove. A new day was rising. Mark stood outside on his lawn, sipping coffee while Lucifer basked on a warm rock behind reinforced glass. Kids from next door waved as they biked past. Mrs. Price had re-landscaped her yard and added a 6-foot flamingo in Karen's honor. The Chos built a composting wall. The Gomez family's dog barked like a champ and no one cared. Erica joined Mark, carrying a clipboard. "They're asking if you'll serve as wildlife safety advisor on the new board," she said. Mark chuckled. "Not sure they're ready for my pet iguana voting on policy?" Erica smirked. "Considering what just happened, I think a reptile has better judgment than most of our former board members." They both laughed. Then Erica handed Mark a small package. "What's this?" he asked. "Found it in the HOA office when we were cleaning out the files. Thought it belonged to you." Mark opened it. Inside was Karen's phone, the one she dropped that day she trespassed. He turned it on, and, surprisingly, it still had power. The last unsent message she'd typed was open on screen. "They think I'm the villain. They don't know I was told to do this. If they find out about the message cut off there. No name, no explanation. Just a half-written warning. Or confession." Mark raised an eyebrow. She wasn't just doing this for herself. Erica nodded slowly. "Looks like there may still be one snake hiding in the grass." Mark looked out over the street, the clean sidewalks, the trimmed hedges, the people who waved like nothing had happened. "But if it slithers out again," he said, "this time, I'll be the one watching."